My daughter's voice on the phone was careful, measured in a way that made my stomach drop. "Dad, I need to show you something. Can I come over tonight? Don't tell Sarah I'm coming." Sarah was my girlfriend of 18 months. At 68 years old, after 3 years of crushing loneliness following my wife Catherine's death, I'd found happiness again with a woman who made me feel young, vital, alive. Sarah was 38, beautiful, attentive, and she said she loved me. My daughter Emma was 42, and the tone in her voice told me she was about to destroy everything. "What's this about?" I asked. "Just trust me, Dad, please. I'll be there at 7. She hung up before I could argue. My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 68 years old, and I spent 40 years as an investment banker before retiring 5 years ago. My wife Catherine and I built a comfortable life together, a house in Westchester, New York, 2 daughters, a portfolio worth about $3 million. We'd planned to travel in retirement, to finally enjoy the wealth we'd accumulated over decades of careful saving and smart investing. Then Catherine got ovarian cancer, 8 months from diagnosis to death. Suddenly, I was alone in a house that felt like a mausoleum, surrounded by memories of a life that had ended. The first 2 years after Catherine died were the darkest of my life. My daughters, Emma and Julia, tried to help. They called daily, visited on weekends, invited me to family dinners, but they had their own lives, their own families. Emma lived an hour away with her husband Mark and 2 teenagers. Julia had moved to California years ago, built a career as a tech executive. I couldn't expect them to fill the void Catherine left. I tried to stay busy. Golf twice a week, volunteer work at the library, weekly dinners with old colleagues from the bank. But every night, I came home to an empty house, to silence, to the crushing awareness that the person I'd shared my life with for 43 years was gone, and I was facing the rest of my existence alone. Catherine and I had talked about death, of course. We'd updated our wills, made our wishes clear, but we'd always assumed I'd go first. Men usually do. She was 5 years younger, healthier, more active. The plan was she'd have 10, maybe 15 years as a widow, then our daughters would take care of her. Instead, she was gone, and I was the one left behind, completely unprepared for the weight of solitude. I met Sarah at a charity gala 18 months ago. I'd almost skipped it, but Emma had bought me a ticket, insisted I needed to get out of the house. "Dad, you can't hide forever. Mom wouldn't want that." She was right. Catherine would have hated seeing me like this, withdrawn, isolated, going through the motions without purpose. So I went, wore the tuxedo Catherine had always said made me look distinguished, and stood awkwardly by the bar, wondering how soon I could leave without seeming rude. That's when Sarah approached me. Dark hair, green eyes, a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but not flashy, professional, confident. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," she said, her voice warm with humor. "Is it that obvious?" I managed to smile. "Only to someone who feels the same way," she laughed. "I'm Sarah Palmer. My company donated to this cause, and they sent me as their representative. I don't really know anyone here." We talked for an hour, standing in that corner by the bar while the gala swirled around us. She was a marketing consultant, she said, recently divorced after a 10-year marriage. No kids. She'd moved to New York from Chicago 6 months ago for a fresh start, wanted to rebuild her life somewhere new. She asked about my life, my career, my family. She seemed genuinely interested when I mentioned my daughters, my late wife, the challenge of starting over at my age. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said quietly. "Trying to build a new life when you spent so long building the old one. Everyone expects you to just move on, like you can flip a switch and stop being who you were." Exactly. Finally, someone who understood, someone who wasn't telling me to move on or get closure or any of the other platitudes people offer to the grieving without realizing how empty those words are. We exchanged numbers. She texted the next day. "I really enjoyed talking to you last night. Would you like to get coffee this week?" I said yes before I could overthink it. Coffee led to dinner, dinner led to walks in Central Park. Within 3 months, we were dating seriously. Within 6 months, she'd started staying over occasionally.
Within a year, she had a toothbrush in my bathroom and clothes in half my closet. Sarah was perfect. She cooked my favorite meals, laughed at my jokes, made me feel like I wasn't just some old man waiting to die. She talked about the future, trips we'd take to Europe, places she wanted to show me in California, restaurants we needed to try. She'd hold my hand in public, kiss me like she meant it, tell me she'd never felt this way about anyone, that our age difference didn't matter because connection transcends numbers.
Emma met her after we'd been dating 4 months. It was a family dinner at my house. Emma, Mark, their teenagers, Katie and James. Sarah was charming, asked the right questions, complimented Emma's dress, talked to the kids about their schools and interests. She seemed genuinely warm, genuinely engaged. But after they left, Emma called me. "Dad, she seems nice, but don't you think the age gap is significant? 30 years, I know. I just want you to be careful. You're vulnerable right now. Make sure she's with you for the right reasons." "She is, Emma. Sarah doesn't care about money. She makes good money herself, has her own career, her own life. She's not some gold digger, if that's what you're implying." Emma backed off. What else could she do? I was a grown man, a successful businessman, perfectly capable of making my own decisions. Or so I thought. Looking back, I should have questioned it. A beautiful 38-year-old woman, successful in her own right, choosing to be with a man 30 years older? But I was lonely, and she was there, and I wanted to believe I deserved this second chance at happiness. After 43 years with Catherine, after building a good life and being a good husband, didn't I deserve to be happy again? The money transfers started small. 6 months into our relationship, Sarah mentioned she was having cash flow issues. A major client hadn't paid an invoice and she needed to cover her rent and business expenses until the payment came through. Could I loan her $3,000? She'd pay me back within 2 weeks. I transferred the money without hesitation. She paid it back in 10 days, exactly as promised. Then her car needed major repairs, $5,000 for a new transmission and brake work. She paid that back too, though it took 3 weeks. Then it was a business investment opportunity. If she could put in $10,000 with a client's project, she'd make triple her investment when it completed. I gave her the money. This time the repayment took a month, and it was only half. "The rest will come," she promised. "The deal is just taking longer than expected. You know how business is." I did know. I'd spent 40 years in finance. Deals fell through, clients paid late, investments took time to mature. It all seemed reasonable. Over 18 months, in amounts small enough that I didn't track them carefully, Sarah had borrowed just over $400,000 from me. Sometimes she paid portions back. Often she didn't. I kept a mental tally, told myself it wasn't a big deal. I had the money. She needed help. That's what partners do, right? Support each other through difficulties. I never told Emma or Julia about the loans. I knew what they'd say. I knew they'd tell me I was being used, that I should demand repayment, that something was wrong. So I kept it to myself, convinced I was helping the woman I loved build her career, invest in her future. Our future, I thought. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Emma, her voice careful and serious, asking to come over, telling me not to mention it to Sarah. I spent the afternoon anxious, rehearsing arguments in my head. Whatever Emma had to say, I'd defend my relationship. I'd make her understand that Sarah made me happy, that I deserved that happiness. She arrived at 7 exactly, Mark with her, both looking grim. Emma was carrying a manila folder. "Dad, we need to talk about Sarah. I know what you're going to say. Dad, please, just listen." She opened the folder. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator. The words hit me like a physical blow. "You did what?" "I'm sorry. I know you'll be angry. But Dad, something didn't add up.
The age gap, the way she was always around but also always busy, the fact that you seemed stressed lately, even though you said you were happy. I needed to know if she was legitimate. You had no right to invade my privacy like that. Dad, Sarah Palmer isn't who she says she is. Emma pulled out photos from the folder. Her real name is Sarah Jennings. She's not a marketing consultant. She's not divorced. She's married. This is her husband, David Jennings. The photo showed Sarah, my Sarah, with a man about her age, maybe 40. They were kissing, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. The timestamp on the photo was from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. While she'd been staying at my house, sleeping in my bed, telling me she loved me. That could be anyone, I said, but my voice was weak. An old photo before her divorce. It's from 2 weeks ago, Dad. The private investigator followed her. She has a house in New Jersey, in Edison. She lives there with her husband and their teenage son. His name is Tyler. He's 16. My hands shook as I reached for the folder. That's not possible. She stays at my house 3 nights a week. She tells her husband she's working late shifts for her consulting job. Dad, she doesn't have a consulting job. She doesn't have any job. She and her husband run romance scams. They target wealthy widowers and divorced men, usually older, vulnerable, lonely. They've been doing this for 8 years. Mark spoke for the first time. Robert, how much money have you given her? I couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was hearing. Sarah, the woman who'd brought joy back into my life, who I'd imagined growing old with, who I thought might be my last chance at love, was a con artist, a professional predator who targeted me deliberately, methodically, the way a lion targets the weakest member of the herd. Dad, Emma said, her voice gentle now. How much? 400,000, maybe a bit more. I didn't keep exact records. She said they were loans, business investments that would pay off. There are no deals, Dad, no clients. Every dollar you gave her went straight to her and her husband. They've probably already spent it. That's how these scams work. They take the money, spend it fast on things they can't easily recover. Cars, vacations, home improvements, their kids' private school. I sat down heavily on the couch. The room seemed to spin. For 18 months, every tender moment, every loving word, every plan for the future, all of it had been theater. I'd been a mark, a target, an old fool who'd let loneliness blind him to reality.
I want to see everything, I said finally. Emma handed over the folder. I spent the next 2 hours reading investigator reports, looking at surveillance photos, reviewing financial records. Sarah, with her husband David, picking up their son Tyler from his private school. Sarah meeting another older man, gray-haired, well-dressed, for dinner at a restaurant in Manhattan, holding his hand across the table. Sarah depositing my checks into a joint account she shared with David Jennings. Sarah shopping at high-end stores, buying designer clothes, jewelry, electronics. The investigator's report was thorough and devastating. Sarah and David had been running romance scams since 2015. They'd been caught twice, but served minimal time because they were careful. David would research potential targets, recent widowers with significant assets, men who'd lost spouses and were likely lonely and vulnerable. Then Sarah would engineer a meeting, usually at charity events or upscale venues where wealthy people gathered. She'd develop the relationship slowly, carefully, always seeming reluctant to accept money until the mark insisted. The most effective scammers, the investigator's report noted, make the victim feel like they're in control, like they're helping, like the relationship is genuine and the financial requests are unfortunate but temporary. That had been exactly my experience. I'd felt generous, supportive, needed. I'd felt like I was building something real with someone who valued me not from my money, but for who I was. The whole thing had been scripted, performed, refined over years of practice. What do I do now? I asked.
"We call the police," Emma said. "We file a fraud report. We try to get your money back and make sure these people can't do this to anyone else." "Will I get the money back?" Mark shook his head. "Probably not much of it. These cases are hard to prosecute because you gave the money voluntarily, and even if you win a judgment, they've likely already spent it. But we have to try, and we have to stop them." The police were sympathetic but realistic. Detective Linda Morrison from the Westchester County Fraud Division took my statement, reviewed my evidence, listened to my story without judgment. "Mr. Mitchell, I'll be honest with you. Romance scam cases are incredibly difficult. You willingly transferred money. There's no evidence of threats or coercion. A good defense attorney will argue these were gifts, not loans, and that the relationship was real until it wasn't. I have text messages where she promised to pay me back. That helps, but they're good at this. They know how to create plausible deniability. Still, we'll investigate. And frankly, we've been building a case against the Jennings couple for a while. Your testimony could be the piece we need." They arrested Sarah 3 days later. Arrested David, too. I watched it happen. The detective had offered to let me be present when they executed the warrants. Sarah was at my house, had come over for dinner like nothing was wrong. The doorbell rang. She answered it, expecting maybe a delivery. Instead, 2 detectives and 4 uniformed officers. The look on her face when she saw them wasn't shock. It was calculation. Measuring angles, looking for exits, deciding her strategy. They read her rights, cuffed her, walked her out past me, standing in my own doorway. She didn't look at me, didn't plead or cry or try to explain, just went silent, the way a professional does when they know they're caught. David was arrested at their house in New Jersey simultaneously. Police found evidence there, laptops with files on multiple victims, offshore bank account information, fake business cards and IDs, a whole operation documented and organized. The DA charged them with multiple counts: fraud, grand larceny, identity theft, running a criminal enterprise, money laundering. Between my case and 3 other victims they'd identified, they estimated total theft at over $2 million across 8 years. I had to testify at the preliminary hearing, had to sit in a courtroom and describe how Sarah had approached me, how we'd developed a relationship, how I'd transferred $400,000 believing I was helping my girlfriend, the woman I thought I'd spend my remaining years with. Sarah's attorney, an expensive lawyer named Richard Shaw, made me feel like the villain. "Mr. Mitchell, you're a sophisticated businessman, correct? Worked in finance for 40 years, made millions of dollars in your career?" "Yes." "So you understand how money works, how investments work, how loans work?" "Of course." "And when you gave Ms. Jennings money, did she force you, threaten you, coerce you in any way?" "No, but did you willingly transfer funds from your accounts to hers?" "She said she would pay me back." "But you didn't require contracts, didn't charge interest, didn't set formal repayment terms. You just gave her money because you cared about her, correct?" "I thought I was helping her." "Helping your girlfriend, which is what people do in relationships. They help each other financially." Shaw smiled. "Mr. Mitchell, isn't it true that you're simply embarrassed the relationship didn't work out and now you want your gifts back?" The prosecution objected, but the damage was done. I felt humiliated, exposed. Shaw was making me look like a bitter old man who'd been dumped and wanted revenge. But then the prosecution presented evidence I hadn't known about. They had Sarah's emails to David, detailed plans of the scam. "Got another $15K from the old banker today. He's so lonely he'll believe anything I say." They had text messages where Sarah and David divided up income from multiple victims, like business partners splitting profits. They had testimony from 2 other men Sarah was running simultaneously, a retired doctor in Manhattan and a divorced CEO in Connecticut. The jury found them both guilty on all counts. Sarah got 6 years in federal prison, David got 8. Restitution was ordered. They had to pay back everything they'd stolen from all victims, but the money was mostly gone. They'd bought a house, cars, funded their son's private school, taken trips to Europe and the Caribbean. The court seized what assets they had, sold the house, the cars, everything. I recovered maybe $60,000 of my $400,000.
But I didn't feel vindicated. I felt old, stupid, embarrassed. I'd let loneliness make me vulnerable. I'd ignored warning signs because I'd wanted so badly to believe that someone as young and beautiful as Sarah could genuinely want to be with me, that I had value beyond my bank account. I'm 70 now, 2 years since Sarah's arrest and conviction. I still live in the house Catherine and I shared, but I made changes, downsized some, redecorated, made it feel less like a shrine to the past. I volunteer more at the library, spend time with Emma's family, video call with Julia and her kids in California every week. I've learned to be alone without being lonely, most days anyway. But I've also learned to be careful, protective, skeptical in ways I never was before. When people ask if I'd ever date again, I tell them no. Not because Sarah broke my heart, she never had my heart, just my money and my loneliness, but because I know now how easy it is to be targeted, how sophisticated these scams have become, how predators identify vulnerable people the way wolves identify injured prey. Emma feels guilty she didn't intervene sooner. I tell her it's not her fault. She tried to warn me, tried to make me cautious. I'm the one who chose to believe that a 38-year-old marketing consultant would fall in love with a 68-year-old widower out of genuine attraction rather than financial opportunity. I share my story now with other widowers, other divorced people, other seniors who find themselves alone later in life. I speak at senior centers, write articles for retirement community newsletters, do interviews with local news when they run stories about romance scams. I tell people about red flags, partners who borrow money frequently, who have vague job descriptions, who discourage you from involving family in your finances. I tell them that if something seems too good to be true, it usually is. That genuine love doesn't move that fast, doesn't center around money, doesn't require secrecy from family. Most importantly, I tell them to involve family. If I'd told Emma about the money loans from the beginning, she would have investigated immediately. She would have uncovered the truth before I lost $400,000. But I kept it secret because I knew what she'd say, and I didn't want to hear it. Pride and shame kept me silent, and that silence cost me. The hardest part wasn't losing the money. Money can be replaced, or at least lived without. The hardest part was realizing that every tender moment, every loving word, every plan for the future had been a performance. Sarah was an actress playing a role, and I'd been her audience, applauding her performance while she picked my pocket. I think about the real Sarah sometimes, not the character she played for me, but the actual person who chose this life, who wakes up every day and decides to exploit lonely people, who sits across from vulnerable seniors and calculates how much she can extract before they catch on, who teaches her teenage son that people are marks, that love is currency, that trust is a weakness to be exploited. I wonder if she feels any remorse. The prosecutor said she showed no emotion at sentencing, just asked when she'd be eligible for parole. 6 years, less with good behavior. She'll be out in 4, probably. Maybe less. And then what? Back to the same scams under a different name? My daughter Julia came to visit last month, flew in from California. We didn't talk about Sarah much, but one evening over dinner she said, "Dad, I'm sorry this happened to you, but I'm glad you're okay, glad you're still here, still yourself." "I'm older and allegedly wiser," I said. "You were lonely. You wanted companionship. That's not stupid. That's human. The people who took advantage of that, they're the ones who should be ashamed." She was right. I'd spent 2 years blaming myself, replaying every interaction with Sarah, wondering how I could have been so blind. But I wasn't blind. I was grieving. I was vulnerable. And Sarah and David Jennings saw that vulnerability and weaponized it for profit. I'm sharing my story because I know I'm not alone. Romance scams target thousands of people every year, primarily older adults, mostly widowed or divorced. The FBI estimates these scams cost victims over $1 billion annually.
Most victims never report it because they're too embarrassed, too afraid their families will think they're senile or incompetent. But we're not incompetent. We're human. We want connection, companionship, love. And wanting those things doesn't make us fools. The fools are the people who exploit basic human needs for profit. My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 70 years old. I lost $400,000 to a romance scammer who pretended to love me while systematically robbing me. But I survived. I learned. And I'm using my experience to help others avoid the same trap. Because the best defense against predators is awareness, is willingness to listen when family expresses concerns, is understanding that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. That genuine love doesn't move that fast, doesn't center around money, doesn't require secrecy from family. Being alone isn't the worst thing. Being with someone who sees you only as a revenue source, who measures your value in dollars, who counts the days until they can move on to the next mark, that's worse than any loneliness. I'm alone now, but I'm safe. My money goes to my daughters, to my grandchildren, to charities I believe in, not to criminals funding their lifestyles with stolen funds. And maybe someday I'll be ready to try again, to open my heart to genuine connection, but this time with my eyes open, with my family involved, with proper caution and healthy skepticism. Because Catherine taught me what real love looks like, and Sarah taught me what fake love costs. Between those two lessons, I've learned to protect myself while still believing that real connection is possible. Just not with predators who wear pretty faces and speak loving words while planning your financial destruction. I survived, and now I'm helping others survive too. That's my justice. That's my second chance, not wasted.